Get your brooms out, folks. On the back of an offensive onslaught in the 10th inning, two home runs from Colton Cowser, the Orioles win all three in Boston against the Red Sox. And I'll recap Thursday night's win coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Friday, April 12th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap a wild win for the Orioles at Fenway Park on Thursday night, winning it 9-4 in 10 innings to complete the sweep over the Red Sox. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from that one, including Colton Cowser hitting his first 2 home runs, the O's exploding as an offense in that 10th inning, and Jackson Holliday still looking for that first hit. Then we'll get to some roster moves from the Orioles on Thursday as they brought back an old friend on waivers and got some bullpen help via a small trade. And finally, we'll preview a fun series coming up this weekend in Baltimore between the Orioles and the Brewers. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers can join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. And we will start today's episode with a wild win for the Orioles on Thursday night. Final score from Fenway Park in Boston, the Orioles 9 and the Boston Red Sox 4, a final in 10 innings up in Massachusetts as the Orioles complete the sweep, winning all 3 games over the Sox on the road to get to 8-4 through 12 games on the season. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from that Orioles 9-4 win. And the first thing you need to know is Colton Cowser finally joined the home run party, and he did it in an awesome way. We know Cowser, when he came up at the end of last year, he struggled and ended up going back down to AAA, wasn't on the O's playoff roster, but he was so fantastic this year in spring training. He wins an opening day roster spot, and then he's just been lighting the world on fire offensively, and especially has just killed the Red Sox in this 3-game series at Fenway. And he capped it off with not just his first career homer, which is what he hit in this game with a solo shot in the 5th inning to get the Orioles on the board. That wasn't it. He chose to hit another one to put the game away, a 3-run shot in the 10th to make it 9-3 and basically put it out of reach. Just what a day for Cowser, who went 3 for 5 total, the 2 homers, a double, 4 RBIs, 4 hard hit balls for Colton Cowser. He is just mashing the baseball around the ballpark right now. It is so fun to watch. The double in the second was just kind of a little, not lazy fly ball, but a little pop into left field that you'll take 2 bases. The home run in the 5th goes the other way over the monster, 104 off the bat, 357 feet. He did ground into a double play in the 7th and ground out in the 9th, but both of those balls were hit over 101 miles per hour off the bat. And then the home run in the 10th that put the game away, I think I've watched it 10 times since it happened. 113.6 miles per hour off the bat. 438 feet to a very deep right center field at Fenway Park. And the big thing was, it was a 3-0 pitch. Cowser could have easily taken that pitch for strike 1 and no one would have batted an eye. The Orioles were already leading 6-3. And he said, you know what? Let's put this game away. Turns on a 91 mile per hour fastball and just demolishes the baseball for a 3-run shot. Colton Cowser, after not really playing too much the first few games, especially when the O's were seeing lefties, Brandon Hyde was trying to hide him from left-handed pitching for good reason. But since then, Colton Cowser has been in the lineup pretty much every day. And I said this before this Red Sox series started. The Orioles were set to face 3 right-handed starters with Boston, something they hadn't seen in a series yet. Coming into this series, they had seen 5 lefties out of 9 games. So seeing righties was a nice change for the Orioles. And I said, pay attention to how much playing time Cowser gets versus how much playing time Austin Hayes gets in this series, because Cowser was starting to swing it and Hayes had been struggling mightily. And what I figured is You'll probably see Cowser twice and Hayes once. Maybe one game you'll see them both in the order. Like, I didn't think they would just kind of bench Austin Hayes for this series, except that's what happened. Cowser starts all 3 games in left field, just sizzling the baseball. He's now hitting .458 with a 1379 OPS on the season. And Austin Hayes, meanwhile, gets 2 at-bats in this series. He came off the bench as a pinch runner and defensive replacement in game 1. He had 1 pinch hit at bat in game 2. He flew out. And he had 1 at bat where he struck out in game 3. So he did play in all 3 games, but didn't start any of them. And it looks like Cowser and Hayes right now are in a platoon. Hayes will play against lefties, so we'll see if he starts against DL Hall on Saturday. But if there's a righty out there, Cowser's going to be in left field for the Orioles. And, I mean, he's deserved it. He has just been unbelievable for the O's so far. Second thing you need to know from the Orioles' 9-4 win on Thursday is that, yeah, the Cowser home runs were awesome, but neither of them were kind of the game-changing homers. The game-changing homers were hit by Gunnar Henderson and by Anthony Santander in this game. The first one coming from Santander, who gave the Orioles the lead in the top of the 8th inning. Santander hitting with a runner on second and 2 down, and the Orioles trailing 2-1 in the 8th. And the Red Sox make a pitching change. They go to Greg Weissert, this kind of like, he's a sweeper guy. He just could throw sweeper after sweeper after sweeper as a right-hander. Santander steps in, gets a sweeper that probably a strike, but like right on the corner, down and in. Not a bad pitch. And Santander just turns on this baseball somehow and uses the pesky pole to his advantage, hooks it down the line, just gets it over that short wall out there for a 2-run homer. He hit it only 97 miles per hour. It only went 332 feet. According to StatCast, it was a home run in only 2 of 30 ballparks. I'm assuming Yankee Stadium is the other one where that one gets out, but it's nice that he was playing at Fenway. A 2-run shot gave the Orioles a 3-2 lead. And then the Red Sox tie it. We go to extra innings, and Gunnar Henderson, who I talked about on yesterday's episode, has just been mashing the baseball and hasn't really been rewarded for it. He's hitting just .229 with an .817 OPS on the season. He got rewarded for one of those hard hit balls, leading off the 10th in a 3-3 game with, of course, the zombie runner on second against the righty Isaiah Campbell, who had come in for the Red Sox. Campbell, by the way, not a fun outing for him on Thursday night, but Henderson just gets a fastball up high on 2-2 and just smacks it over the monster. It was like the easiest home run, line drive homer over the monster that I've ever seen. Henderson just turns it the other way, 105 off the bat, 371 feet, opposite field, 2-run homer, gives the O's the lead. He flicks the wrist and just hits a 2-run homer. The strength is unbelievable from Gunnar, and just 2 huge home runs by 2 top-of-the-order bats that probably haven't been getting, neither of them, Santander or Henderson, the results that they've wanted so far this season. Third thing you need to know from the win on Thursday, that on the flip side, Jackson Holliday, batting 9th again, playing second base again for his second career game, is still searching for that first big league hit. Now, he had some chances, right? He was up there trying to get a big hit, but he ends up going 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts. He did have 2 runs scored in this game, but Holliday just couldn't come through. Really, the biggest chance he had in this game was in the top of the 9th inning, 3-3 game. Holliday comes up with runners on first and second and 2 outs, facing a potential Hall of Fame closer in Kenley Jansen. And it's a tough break for Jackson Holliday to face Jansen. Jansen gets him swinging to strike him out with a high cutter, and Holliday still searching. You know, he's got the runs, he's got the RBIs. He made a couple of good plays at second base on Thursday night as well, but just still looking for that first hit. It's going to come. Don't worry. He's a special player. But here's the other thing, like, he's hitting 9th. Yeah, he's 0 for whatever so far. He doesn't have to feel the pressure because the O's are playing so well. This lineup is so deep. That's the great part. They can just continue to hit him 9th until he gets going and then start to move him up the order. It's kind of a soft landing for Holliday to start his big league career. Fourth thing you need to know from the Orioles win Thursday at Fenway Park is that Grayson Rodriguez had kind of a first inning to forget, but really did settle down after that one. Rodriguez, in his 3rd start of the season, goes 5 2/3 innings, allowing 2 runs on 6 hits, strikes out 5, walks 2, and throws 94 pitches. Now has a 2.50 ERA through 3 starts on the season, 7 hard hit balls by Red Sox hitters. It was kind of a tough first inning. He gives up a leadoff double, and then there's just a little bit of small ball being played by the Red Sox. They end up getting the run home with 2 outs. Then there's just a lazy fly ball to shallow right field that should have been easily the 3rd out, a 1-0 game heading into the 2nd. And just Anthony Santander didn't see it off the bat. It falls in for a ground rule double. Very next pitch is an RBI double from Wilyer Abreu. And all of a sudden it's 2-0, and Grayson probably shouldn't have been in that spot, but he wiggles out of the first, and then he just starts throwing up zeros. Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth inning. Just keep posting the zeros, keep the Orioles in the game, give this offense, this comeback offense, a chance to get back in it. That is what Grayson did. I would say among his 3 starts so far this year, this was his worst, but it wasn't bad. Like, he's been good in all 3 starts. He got 30 whiffs on 46 swings, not an amazing number, but he threw all 5 of his pitches, the 4-seamer, changeup, curveball, cutter, and sinker. He got at least 2 whiffs on every single one, on all 5 of those offerings. That means he probably felt like he was mixing his pitches really well. This was the least amount of fastballs he's thrown in every start. It was more curveballs and more changeups than we've seen, but he did enough to mix the pitches well, keep the Red Sox off balance, and after a tough start, keep the Orioles in the game, keep them right there, showed the dominant stuff as the game went on, more and more strikeouts. I just love watching Grayson Rodriguez pitch right now. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the O's win at Fenway on Thursday is that this Oriole bullpen just continues to keep this team in games. And obviously Grayson Rodriguez did a great job, but once he left the game, and he was not happy to come out of the game. I like that fire from Rodriguez. He was at 94 pitches. There was a runner on first. He had gotten a fly out, so there were 2 outs in the bottom of the 6th. The Orioles were trailing 2-1. He probably knew that he wasn't going into the 7th, but he wanted to finish off that 6th inning. Brandon Hyde made the move. Grayson Rodriguez yelled a certain 4-letter word a couple of times into his glove before Hyde took the ball, but that's just a competitor that Grayson Rodriguez is. Hyde goes to Jacob Webb and just kind of starts the bullpen train that helped the Orioles win this game. Webb gets 4 outs. He gets out of the 6th. He gets through the 7th unscathed. The O's take the lead in the 8th. Unfortunately, Danny Coulomb had his first blemish of the year, and he came into the 8th inning because all the lefties were coming up for the Red Sox. He gets the first 2 lefties out in a 3-2 game. They go to the bench. They pinch hit Connor Wong, who's a righty who crushes left-handers. And it wasn't even a bad 2-2 cutter from Danny Coulomb. Like, it was a strike, but it was right on the corner. Wong just golfs that thing over the monster to tie the game at 3. Tough break for Coulomb, who's been so great. Cano comes in, gets the final out of the 8th to keep it tied. They go to Craig Kimbrell, who gets himself a nice little 1-2-3 inning in the bottom of the 9th to get it to extras. And then I thought it was nice that the Orioles ended up using Mike Baumann in the 10th inning again. Remember, Mike Baumann pitched the bottom of the 10th in Pittsburgh back on Saturday when the O's had just a 1-run lead, and he completely fell apart and gave up the lead. Well, Baumann did strike out the side in the game on Wednesday. And then the Orioles, the offense explodes. They get 6 runs in the top of the 10th in this game. The Gunnar 2-run homer. They get some runners on. Mullins has the RBI single, and then Cowser caps it with his 3-run shot, and it's 9-3. So you're like, this could be a perfect spot for Baumann to kind of redeem himself in the 10th inning. You go back to Mike Baumann. It's the same spot, but way less pressure because you got a 6-run lead instead of a 1-run lead with the runner on second. And he did allow the runner to score, but most people do. Gets out of it, finishes the game. O's win at 9-4. Should be a big confidence boost for Baumann, and as he hopes to continue to hold on to his bullpen spot. I think really my only question about the Orioles bullpen right now is, like, is Dylan Tate okay? I figured Tate would be the guy in the 10th inning, maybe no matter what, and he didn't end up being the guy. He's only pitched 4 times in 12 games, which isn't crazy, but he's only pitched once in the last 9 days. He pitched in the game on Saturday in Pittsburgh. Just 1 outing in 9 days makes you worry a little bit about Dylan Tate, because it's not like he's Jonathan Heasley. Like, Heasley's on the team right now, but he is the last guy in the bullpen. He's the mop-up guy. He's the long reliever. Dylan Tate's a guy you would think would be one of their solid middle relievers that Brandon Hyde would go to, and maybe there just hasn't been a spot for him in the last week or so, but hoping Tate is all good. Otherwise, feeling real good about this Oriole bullpen as they help this team to a 9-4 win and a sweep. Always love getting the sweep up there at Camden North in Fenway. And the Orioles come home after what many fans thought was a complete disaster to start the road trip with the 2 losses in Pittsburgh. The O's right the ship, win them all in Boston, and come home with an 8-4 record on the season. And they're also coming home with a couple of new players on the 40-man roster. Orioles had 2 open spots on their 40-man heading into Thursday, and now it is full. And coming up next, we'll talk about the 2 players that the Orioles added and why one of them could actually be making an impact pretty soon for this Orioles team at the big league level. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Ibata. Spring is sprung, and that means spring cleaning. So whether that means stocking up on cleaning supplies or swapping out your winter clothes for new spring clothes, make sure you're using Ibata to get real cash back with every single purchase. Ibata is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you are purchasing. The average Ibata user earns $256 a year. That's a nice little chunk of change to have in your pocket. And they've got over 50 million users that love it and keep coming back every single time and getting their cash back. And right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibata by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Ibata, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by DK Law Group. When you need a law firm, do you want the legal runaround, or would you rather have a no-nonsense approach? Well, you get the latter with DK Law Group. DK Law Group specializes in real estate law, estate planning, business law, and family law. They are tech savvy. They treat clients like family, and they focus on keeping your legal solutions very, very simple. Isn't that great? I don't know anything about legally what's going on working with a lawyer, but they keep things simple. That is truly the best part. So contact DK Law Group today at dklawmd.com. And Locked On listeners can call today to schedule a free 30-minute consultation when you mention the tagline, Empowering Legacies. So the Orioles picked up a huge win to complete their sweep on Thursday night in Boston, 9-4 in extra innings. Colton Cowser, 2 homers. Grayson Rodriguez, good. Orioles score six in the top of the 10th inning. Like, I would have thought the Gunnar Henderson homer would be enough. No, they just kept going with 6 runs. You better put that thing away in extras after what happened in Pittsburgh on Saturday, and that is exactly what the Orioles did. But they didn't just add on runs in the 10th on Thursday. They also added a couple of players to their roster before the game as well. And the first one I want to talk about is Yohan Ramirez, a right-handed pitcher who the Orioles acquired in a small trade with the New York Mets on Thursday, sending some cash to the Mets to get Ramirez back. Now, Yohan Ramirez, a couple of days ago, had been DFA'd by the Mets. Actually, funny enough, the Mets were looking to get some space on their roster because they wanted to call up Orioles' old friend Cole Sulser. And so to make room for Sulser, they DFA'd Yohan Ramirez, and the Orioles said, thank you very much. I will be taking one Yohan Ramirez. Now, who is Ramirez? 28-year-old. He's about to be 29 in May. 6'4" right-handed pitcher who has been in the big leagues, kind of in and out of the bigs since 2020. He debuted with the Seattle Mariners in the 2020 season and had pretty good numbers. Threw about 21 innings in the shortened year, had a 2.61 ERA. The walks were a huge issue, but his stuff was pretty good out of that Mariner bullpen. He returned to the Mariner bullpen in 2021 and was still solid, 28 innings, a 3.9 ERA, still pretty good. Got the walks down to something a little bit more manageable. And then in 2022 was when he kind of started to bounce around a little bit. Pitched for the Mariners, Guardians, and Pirates in that 2022 season. The Pirates was the team he finally caught on with and started to have a little more success again. Then he started 23 with the Pirates, had a little more success, but ended that year with the White Sox, just continued to kind of bounce around and always had this good strikeout stuff with some walk issues, and you weren't quite sure what he would be. Well, he finally catches on with the Mets this year and actually did make the Mets opening day roster out of the bullpen, but it did not go so well for him out of the pen. He pitched in 3 games for the Mets, went 5 1/3 innings, and the stats were not great. He allowed 7 runs on 9 hits. He did have 6 strikeouts, but he walked 4 batters. He had an intentional walk in there. He hit a batter, and he was also ejected from a game and has already served a 3-game suspension this season because if you remember, there was a little dust up between the Mets and the Brewers. Funny enough, the Brewers come into Camden Yards this weekend where Rhys Hoskins had kind of a hard slide into second base, and Yohan Ramirez then threw behind Hoskins, got ejected from the game, was suspended for 3 games. Well, funny enough, Ramirez is most likely going to be joining the Orioles roster this weekend, either Friday or Saturday, with Rhys Hoskins and the Brewers in town. Now, I don't like players that are throwing at other guys. That needs to be out of the game. But I do believe a lot of that comes from clubhouse culture. And if you're being enabled by other guys on your team to do those things, you will do it. The Orioles have pretty much set a precedent under Brandon Hyde. That is not how they operate. They don't operate on BS, on old school rules. It's not something they do. So hopefully Yohan Ramirez was just playing up to what his team wanted instead of what he actually thinks should happen in the game. And hopefully nothing like that happens when he puts on an Orioles uniform. So yes, the stats did not look good this year, but if you go to a bigger sample size just from last year with Pittsburgh and Chicago, 31 games, 38 and a third innings. He had a 4.23 ERA last season in 2023 with about a 20% strikeout rate. It's okay. 10% walk rate, a little concerning. So what does he throw out there? Like, what should we look for? Because here's the thing with Ramirez. He's got to be on the roster. Yohan Ramirez, the reason why he was DFA'd by the Mets is that he is out of minor league options. Remember, I did an episode last week about what it means to have options, be on waivers. He is out of options, which means when the Mets felt like they wanted to take him off the roster, he had to be put on waivers. The Orioles didn't want to wait for him to get to them in the waiver order, so they jumped the line, offered the Mets some cash in a trade, and acquired Ramirez. Because he doesn't have options, with the Orioles claiming him, they have to put him on their active 26-man roster, or they have to put him on waivers again. They're not going to claim a player just to put him back on waivers. So Ramirez is going to be on the roster whenever he gets to Baltimore. It'll either be Friday or at the latest Saturday before the game. He will be put on the Orioles roster. Now, most likely, it will be Jonathan Heasley, who is sent down to AAA. Heasley hasn't pitched a whole lot. He's kind of here as the mop-up guy. He has options. I would say there's a 99% chance that Heasley just goes down to AAA and Ramirez takes his spot because right now Ramirez just a higher ceiling. Now, what does he throw? Well, it is pretty much a 4-pitch mix at this point for Ramirez, and you could argue there's a 5th pitch in there. But this year so far with the Mets, he threw a sinker, a sweeper, a curveball, and a 4-seamer, and he did throw a changeup a little bit last year as well, so that could be in the mix, but hasn't thrown it yet this season. The interesting part about Ramirez is it's a sinker sweeper combo for most of his pitches. I mean, that is going to be the overwhelming majority of what he throws. The sinker averages about 94 miles an hour. It's a pitch he uses to get a lot of ground balls. And the sweeper comes in at about 81. It's got a lot of movement and it gets a lot of swing and miss. That sweeper last year had a 37% swing and miss rate on it, pretty solid. And opponents only hit 211 against his sweeper last season. It is a pretty nasty pitch. He feels comfortable throwing it to righties and lefties. And a sinker sweeper combo can work out pretty well. I am very intrigued to see what the Orioles can do with Yohan Ramirez. And actually, he was a name I mentioned a couple of weeks ago on the podcast that could have been the Orioles' kind of Danny Coulombe style pitcher when I felt like they were one reliever short and I felt like they should have added somebody right before opening day like they did with Coulombe last year. I threw out the name Yohan Ramirez. Apparently, Mike Elias liked him too. Now, it took another 2 weeks after opening day, but they get their guy in Ramirez. Again, he is out of options, so he will be on the team, and he will have kind of a short leash because if he really struggles, the O's are just going to DFA him as well and bring back up a different pitcher to take his place. But I am intrigued by the stuff. The sweeper is pretty nasty. I like a good hard sinker, and maybe the O's will get him to start throwing his changeup again, which he hasn't thrown yet this year, and mix it in. He also started throwing a curveball this year. The O's may like that. Either way, there's something they've identified, and we may get to see Ramirez make his Orioles debut this weekend. And then the other move that they made was a much smaller move. The Orioles claiming infielder Livan Soto off waivers from the Angels. If you remember that name, it's because the Orioles during the offseason claimed Livan Soto off waivers from the Angels. Then later in the offseason, DFA'd him, and the Angels claimed him back. And now they're just passing Livan Soto back and forth. This time, it's Soto going back to the Orioles. Now, Soto is a guy who does have minor league options, so the Orioles immediately send him down to AAA Norfolk. He's a guy who they like his depth and is just going to kind of be depth on the Norfolk roster. But because of those 2 moves, the Orioles' 40-man roster is full, so we'll see how they kind of play through that. Soto this year with the Angels AAA team had not been hitting too much, just a 214 average in 35 plate appearances. But Mike Elias and the Orioles clearly like something there if they're claiming him twice in the span of like 3 months. But again, mostly going to be a depth option for the Orioles. But again, Yohan Ramirez, the more interesting one, most likely going to join the team this weekend as the O's take on the Brewers. And that's what we'll get to coming up next to finish off the pod. Orioles, Brewers, fun series. 2 of the best teams in baseball so far this year matching up in Baltimore. I'll preview the weekend set to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL, baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit fanduel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So the Orioles now at 8-4 after sweeping the Red Sox, going 4-2 on their road trip to Pittsburgh and Boston. They come back home to take on the Milwaukee Brewers, a team that seemingly looks like it was kind of in sell mode, right? I mean, they did trade Corbin Burnes to the Orioles this offseason, but they've been great to start the year. Brewers 8-3 to begin the season, sitting just behind the Pirates in second place in the NL Central. And they are coming to Baltimore for a 3-game series that kicks off tonight, 7:05 p.m. Eastern time. It's the Orioles and the Brewers. It is Jackson Holliday's Oriole Park debut, and he's most likely going to be in the lineup to make the debut. Now, if you're at the ballpark, there's a t-shirt giveaway. It's going to be great. If you're not, there is only one way to watch it. It's not on MASN. This is an Apple TV Plus Friday night game. So see if there's a free trial period. See if anybody's got the login, whatever you can do. Try and get Apple TV Plus. That is the only way to watch tonight's game, which again is at 7:05. And it will be a little different pitching matchup than we had talked about. Initially, DL Hall, the former Oriole, was slated to start Friday night's game, but the Brewers game on Thursday got rained out. And because of that, the Brewers pushed all their pitchers back one turn. So instead, Freddie Peralta, the ace of this Brewers staff, the right-hander who's still here, even with Corbin Burnes and Brandon Woodruff gone, Peralta will start game one on Friday against Tyler Wells. And hopefully, this is when Jackson Holliday, again, he's going to be in the lineup against the righty. Hopefully, this is when Holliday does come up with his first big league hit in this game. Peralta's been pretty good through 2 starts. He has allowed just 4 runs in 12 innings with 15 strikeouts to just 2 walks. His stuff is nasty. He's the ace of this staff now, and a really, really good right-hander in Freddie Peralta. Against Tyler Wells, who has had 2 starts where he's given up some runs early, settled down later, and that's kind of what I would expect again from Tyler Wells. Then Saturday is a 4:05 start. I will be at the ballpark making my Oriole Park debut in 2024. First game of the season for me. If you see me around the ballpark, please come say hi. Let's chat Orioles. DL Hall will be making his Oriole Park return on Saturday. Slated to be the Saturday starter as a left-hander. He will go up against Dean Kramer for the Orioles. Now, one thing I will tell you, if you're going to the game Saturday to see Jackson Holliday, I think there's a pretty good chance Holliday does not start Saturday's game. I think the Orioles will hide him a little bit against left-handers early in his time in the big leagues, and Hall is, of course, a lefty. And after playing 3 straight games, especially if he doesn't have a hit yet, Brandon Hyde might want to just rest him one day and then get him back in the lineup on Sunday. But most likely, DL Hall is not pitching deep into the game. So as soon as the Brewers go to a right-handed reliever, I would expect Holliday to come off the bench as a pinch hitter and stay in the game. But there is a good chance he does not start on Saturday. Hall, however, it's been kind of a rocky start to his time with the Brewers. 2 starts with Milwaukee, only 9 1/3 innings pitched in those 2 starts, 14 hits allowed, only 5 runs, only 6 strikeouts to 4 walks. But the big issue has been the fastball velocity. He's been throwing basically like 92 miles an hour on the fastball, which is way down from what we're used to seeing with DL Hall, even when he does start games. So that's something to monitor. I still will be giving him a standing ovation when he gets to the mound. You know, it wasn't a lot of time in the big leagues, but it was awesome when we saw him. There was a lot of hope, a lot of promise for DL Hall. We thank him for what he did here. We thank him for helping the Orioles get their ace in Corbin Burnes. And I'm really excited for Hall that he has this chance to start with the Brewers, and I'm excited to watch him pitch back at Camden Yards on Saturday. And Dean Kramer just, again, been solid for the O's. Hopefully he continues to be solid in that game. And then Sunday will be the finale at 1:35. Colin Ray will start that one for the Brewers, the right-hander, which means Holliday most likely going to be back in that Oriole order on Sunday. Colin Ray, just kind of a journeyman who found his way back to the Brewers and was good last year, has been really good so far. 2 starts, has allowed just 2 runs over 11 innings. Not a big strikeout guy, has given up a good amount of hits, but finds a way to get out of jams and pitch, semi-deep into games. So we'll see what Ray can do against the Orioles, and he'll be going up against Corbin Burnes, who will make his fourth Orioles start and will get to make it against his old team. The Corbin Burnes revenge game after the Orioles acquired him from Milwaukee in the offseason. Some very, very fun storylines this weekend between these two teams. And I haven't even mentioned Joey Ortiz, who, of course, was also traded to Milwaukee in the Burnes deal. Ortiz hasn't been playing every day, but when he's been in there, he's been pretty good for the Brewers so far. 24 plate appearances, hitting 300 on the season so far. Really happy for Ortiz. Made some nice plays defensively as well. It seems like he's kind of just been playing against lefties, and the Orioles are not starting a lefty this weekend, all three righties. So we'll see I hope Ortiz at least gets in one of these games off the bench. We will certainly see. I will definitely, if he gets in the game Saturday, be giving him a standing O to thank him for his time with the Orioles as well. But the Brewers offense has been great. William Contreras has been awesome. Christian Yelich is looking like his MVP self. He's been amazing so far this year. And they've gotten some other contributions like, Jackson Chourio has been pretty good. The star rookie, Bryce Terang, has been great, getting fairly regular at bats. So a lot of contributors to this Brewers team so far this season. Even Blake Perkins has been like awesome for them as more of a bench player. The one issue with the Brewers has been their bullpen this season so far. And again, it's only 11 games and they are 8-3. They've been great, but their bullpen has not been nearly as good as it's been in years past. Some of that is they don't have Josh Hader anymore, obviously. And also Devin Williams is out for like 3 months. He had some back issues. He was the star closer who took over, and they didn't miss a beat when he took over for Hader. They're kind of struggling a little bit. Abner Uribe, a 24-year-old righty with nasty stuff, has been the guy who's kind of stepped into the closer role. He does have 3 saves, but he also has a 5.40 ERA so far on the season. The other guys that were good for them last year, like Bryce Wilson and Joel Payamps, those guys are really struggling as well in the back end of the bullpen. Their bullpen ERA is fairly high at this point, so just something to monitor. Maybe if the O's are struggling against the starters, could get into that bullpen. And just will be a really fun series to watch this weekend between, again, two of the best teams in baseball so far this year, the Brewers and the Orioles. And then I will be back with you on Monday recapping the entire weekend series. Hopefully I'm talking about another O's series win and Jackson Holliday picking up his first big league hit as well. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.